Okay. The tape is rolling.
You ready?
Yep.
Mem Gimel. ומכל הנ"ל יובן גם פרנים של המסל למעלה, בהתבוננות כמה פרטים, בהשתלשלות מלמעלה עד למטה מטה. נכלו כולם בכלל אל מוקר הרישיין, שהוא כאשר על המחשבות הפשוטה כולו בעצמו ישראל צריך שלפני הצמצום, שכל מגיל מדרגס מחשב דיבר מייסה, שבמחשב הנ"ל, ובחינת מייסה שבמחשב העצמית, שבעצמית ממש, וכמו עניין סויף מייסה שעל המחשב התחילה. וזה לא כלושן הרמב"ם בידיעת עצמו יודע את הכל, אלא מה שיודע את כל ההשתלשלות דהבייה בידיע שחוץ ממנו. היינו, בחינת עשייה שמחשבה כמו שחושב בציר דובר נבדל. הגם שאין לך דבר חוץ כולו. So, what he's saying, he's not arguing with the Rambam here, by the way. He's saying that basically the Eibusher had a machshava of the world as if the world is a separate thing. Although this is not necessarily really other than what the Rambam is saying, except what the Rambam is saying, and that's like usually an ox, is that when a person in the machshava pshuta, we usually say that it's not really the actual house, but it's really himself. It's really his tainug that he's thinking of. But what he said is, no, the Eibusher actually thought of the actual house. Because it's a different thing. That's why he's saying that it's not just, it doesn't mean that it's different from the Rambam. What it means is not just like the Rambam. In other words, when a person thinks of a chair, before he thinks of it, he really doesn't think of a chair. He thinks of sitting. But that's a different thing because it's not really literally the actual chair that comes out of his sitting, because he's going to go and look around and find a chair that somebody actually designed. Now, the guy who designed it had to design an actual chair and think not only of the comfort of the sitter, but of the actual chair. You know, like in terms of which nuts will go where, which the sitter didn't think about. In other words, even when he's sitting it, he's not really thinking at all about the fact that there's certain nuts and bolts and pieces of wood or whatever that are making up the chair. But the designer did have to think about it, and he had to think about it as a chair, something separate from the actual sitting. And this is what he's saying, that when the Eibusher thought of the world, he didn't just think about it in terms of the fact that he's going to have a dir b'tachtainim, but he thought of it in terms of designing an external thing all the way down to its last detail, the last nut and bolt. The Eibusher had to think of it in a way of like you think of an external thing, of putting something together. And even though he says, and even though there is nothing really outside of him, but he had a thought of as if he was making together an outside of him, meaning that it's not just like automatically happen, but the Eibusher had to design every little tiny detail of the world. So, like, for instance, you know, like they have these shows on the wonders of nature. So the thing is, oh, Mother Nature is so wondrous, as if like it somehow happens by this Mother Nature that's doing it. And if you tell them, well, wait a minute, so who is this Mother Nature? She must be a very great genius. They'll tell you, well, there's no really Mother Nature. So you say, well, so what do you mean? So how does it happen? So they'll come up with things like, oh, the natural selection and things like that, which basically what they're saying is it happens naturally, that it's inherent in the actual natural universe. To come out like that, you know.
Right.
even if you say, well, it took billions of years, you say, well, I don't care how many billions of years you're gonna wait. Certain things are not going to happen if they're not inherent in like, for instance, like, let's say I'll tell her, well, does that mean, let's say if we wait a certain amount of billions of years, sooner or later they'll evolve a light ray that goes around and round instead of straight? I say, no, that's not possible, because it's not inherent in nature. The light's not going to evolve into a... So why not? It'll mutate. So no, that can't happen. So you say, well, that means that whatever you're saying took millions of years, so you're saying that it's inherent within nature for it to happen. And it just sort of happens automatically. But really what he's saying here is, no, it doesn't happen. There's nothing that happens automatically. Anything that happens, really the final bottom line is the Eibusher has to design every little piece of it. Same like in a Sefer Sipur, or like in a painting. Like in a painting, the fact that the leaf grows out of the branch is not really natural. The painter had to paint the leaf, and the painter had to paint the branch, and the painter had to paint the earth. And it's not just that naturally the tree in the painting. Well, they say, well, how did that tree get into the painting? Well, they say, what do you mean, how did the tree? You see the sun is up in the sky. You see the ground is below. And it must have rained a little bit before in the painting. And that's how the tree grew in the painting. So what do you mean? It's not possible. It doesn't work like that in a painting. So what he's saying is that the same like we say, well, the only way that it happened is that the artist had to do it, and it's not that it was automatic. He just thought of a painting, and then poof, the painting came up. He said, well, let's have a painting of like a beautiful scene with a house and a tree and a little kid running around. And poof, it happened. No, he had to, like even with the kid, he didn't paint the kid. He had to think of the kid. But then he had to think of it, in other words, first of all, he thought of it in terms of himself. In other words, this scene came out of a tainug that he had within himself for a certain thing, like for that scene, that emotion of like a house and a tree and a little kid running around. But then finally he had to sit down there, and every stroke of the pen and brush that you see on that canvas have to be put on there technically, in a technical fashion, not in an emotional fashion, even though it brings out an emotion, but it has to be put on there technically. And that's what he's basically saying here, that the machshava for Asiya, like he said, remember the machshava dibur ma'aseh of machshava?
Yeah.
He says machshava of Asiya is like when you think how to do a certain thing.
Right.
Right? Like if you think, well, I would like to make a thing, like let's say, like a piece of clothing. I want to make one, or I want to build a little contraption, or I want to weave a basket. So you think, so how should I do it? Well, I'll need these and these materials. And then what kind of weave should I use, etc., you know?
Right.
You have to figure out what your materials are, how it will get weaved together, which, by the way, the universe is sort of like a weave, in a way. That's why one of the malachas is weaving. You know, when you make a shtiva Arab.
Right.
And now they're starting to find out, like the more subatomic particles, you know, that they had it down to the quarks already.
Right.
Now they're coming up, I don't know if you heard of string theory.
Yeah, the string theory.
Yeah. String theory is even smaller things, and they seem to be, now they're coming up with 11 dimensions. They don't realize there's more than 11 dimensions. There's many dimensions the Eibusher wants it to be. And basically these strings are like, they weave into these, like almost like origamis or something like that, and in collapse, and they sort of collapse on themselves in 11 dimensions or something like that, and they weave up into the subatomic particles. And apparently, like in time also there's strings. It all comes out of strings. So basically the thing is that in order to make the world, the Eibishter has to actually place each little dot, each little quark, each little atom, and the stuff they're making also. In other words, like when you see a painting, there's nothing on that painting that wasn't put on there.
Right.
The tree didn't just grow by itself like that. They say, well, how does such a big tree there? Look at that beautiful big peach tree. How did it get there? I said, what do you mean, how did it get there? A seed was in the ground, and it grew. So what are you talking about? You can't have a seed in the ground grows on a painting. The artist had to put it there. Everything there, like every little piece there, it's not that the artist painted a seed, and then the seed grew. And the same thing like in a cartoon. In a cartoon, you know, you see in a cartoon like Jack and the Beanstalk. You see in the cartoon, he puts the thing in the ground and it grows. Well, what's so funny? I mean, it's a miracle. It's growing so fast. So what are you talking about? It's a miracle. Whatever the artist puts, it'll grow whatever the way. It doesn't have to grow because each painting, he's painting it.
Right. Every frame is painted.
Every frame is painted. And the basic thing is that, you know, nothing is there without the guy knowing exactly where it was and putting it there. So that's what he's saying. This machshava that he's talking about is not the machshava that he's thinking of himself, how he's going to sit in the house, but he's actually thinking of how exactly to make the house, what materials he's going to need.
Right.
Like nails, and then he has to think down all the way to this nail will go here because, like, see, it's really even more intricate than what we think about. Because, like, when you build a house, you don't have to really call the nails by name.
Right.
You just buy a box of nails, and then when you're ready to bang a stud up into another stud, you just take one of those nails and you bang it in.
Right.
The way the world is made is not like that.
Right.
Each nail has to have a name.
Right.
And each stud has a name. And if you put the wrong nail in the wrong stud, the whole house will fall apart.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That, like the stars, it says, Lakulam Shemus Yikra. It's not that just he put a bunch of stars out there. Each star has a name.
Right.
And it has to be in that exact location. If you take that location out, a whole catastrophe could happen. Like what it says that at the Mabul, one of the Mefarshim says that he took 2 stars out of some mazel.
Right.
And that's what caused the flood. They should remove 2 stars out. What are you talking about? What do you mean he removed 2 stars out? And also, how would that, you know, those stars are like thousands or millions of light years away. Well, how would that affect on Earth? He said, yeah, that's what you think. You don't understand how it works. The Abishah knows exactly how it works. He knew if you take those 2 stars out, it'll make a marble over here.
Right.
You know, so that every little thing, the stars are called by name. Every star has a name.
Right.
And the Abishah knows which star is which and which one is supposed to do which, and inside of them, what kind of star it is, and what gravitational pulls it has, and it's all very exact.
Right.
So that
and
it's
that
like...
goes to the finest detail of the finest atom.
Right, and not only that, the atoms also are not interchangeable.
Right.
They have names. You know, there's Jaime and Shlomi, you know.
Right.
And And the basic thing, like also in science, the way they figure it out is there's like this massive electrons, and they just fly all around. You know, and they're sort of like interchangeable. It doesn't matter which one is where. But it's not really true.
Right.
Like if, like for instance, like you say, like what if, like right now, electron Jaime, who's in your room over there, there's a whole bunch of electrons. And electron Jaime is flying around your room someplace.
Right.
And over here in the place, there's electron Shloimi.
Right.
What if we would be able to take Jaime and put him here and Shloimi and put him there?
Right.
It wouldn't change nothing because the electric charge would still be the same.
Right.
This is an electron and that's an electron. But actually that's not true. Jaime has to be there in that exact location and Shloimi has to be here in this exact location.
Right.
Otherwise the whole mathematics of the universe would change and the whole thing could collapse.
Right.
And he said, what are you talking about? Because you changed two electrons? Yeah, the whole universe would just collapse on itself because the math would be wrong.
Right.
You know, like that's one of the things they're coming up with string theory. Basically, one of the things that they don't know what it is, but it's becoming evident from it that the whole entire universe could be represented with a single numerical formula.
Right.
And by the way, of course, we know that a name is a number.
Right.
Like, you know, the names Havaya, there's Ab, Sag, Ma, Ban.
Right.
72, 45, 63, 45, and 52.
Right.
You say the name, you say what? The name of 52. What do you mean the name of 52? What does 52 have to do with a name? What is it? Because a name is made up of letters and those are numbers.
Right.
They're mathematical formulas.
Right.
That's what it says, that the whole world is, the whole Olam Haba is made from the Yud. I mean, the whole heavens is made from the Yud, and the whole earth is made from the Hay.
Right.
Which is just a part of the mathematical formula, because the whole Yud Kei Vav Kei includes, that's the name that includes everything in it. It's like a mathematical formula that breaks up, like that's the whole thing with the Relasha Arim and all that stuff. It breaks down into Temuros and Chilufim and Miluim and the Miluim, I have Miluim, you know. And the whole thing is can be symbolized into that one name, Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hey, go ahead.
So, if you would exchange those two electrons, it means it's not just a matter that in general you have to have enough electrons in your room. Like you say, well, if you take away one electron, the electric charge wouldn't be right. But even then, they don't think that anything would happen. Like if this electron would just stop existing, you say, well, other electrons would just fill its place. But yeah, but what would happen to their place?
Right.
So the thing is that really, in order to have the mathematical formula exactly right, each nail has to be in the right place. You can't put nail 1 in the place of nail 2.
Right.
They're not interchangeable, really.
Right.
Like by us, certain things are interchangeable. Like you know, when you work in the restaurant and somebody comes and orders something, you don't have to think, oh wait a minute, which steak was meant for him.
Right.
Okay, however, it's not really true. It was dafka, that steak that was meant for him. Dafka.
Right. Right.
And he couldn't eat somebody else's steak.
Right.
He has to eat this steak. He said, why would he have, what's the difference which steak he eats? He said, because that's the steak that has the netzoitis that are his netzoitis.
Right.
You know, like the story with I think it was it the Ruzhiner or the Colliner? You know, the guy that came in and brought a bottle of vodka because it was his father's yard site. You know the story?
I don't know the story.
This guy, I think, who was it? The Karliner or the Berditchever, one of the great Rebbes from the Alter Rebbe's time, I think. This guy came in and he brought a bottle of vodka because his father's yard site. So he came in, he said a quick Kaddish, and then he put the bottle on the table, and he was going to run out because he had to go to work. He was in a hurry. They told him, "Wait a minute, it's your father's yard site. You have to make a l'chaim." And he said, "Oh, I don't have time. He was like a fry yid, you know.
Right.
I got to get. I just came, you know, because my father's yard site, but I got to get out of here." So they said, "Wait a minute. What do you mean we're going to make this is aliyah for your father? This is the tikkun, you know?" So they were bothering him, and father said, "Okay." So they poured him a little schnapps, and he just took it and drank it down. So they all started shouting, you know, "What do you mean? What did you do? You didn't say the bracha."
Right.
He said, "What's the difference if I said the bracha or not?"
Right.
So just then the Rebbe walked in. The Rebbe walked in and he went up to him and he told him, "Let me tell you a story. Your father, when he went upstairs to the court, there was all kinds of masmilim and maiminim. And it was a whole thing, and finally it was decided that he should go to hell. And still they argued, and the maiminim said, "Yeah, but he did so many mitzvahs, why would you send him to hell?" But the masmilim said, "Look, but the averos are bigger." So what did they do? They finally decided that they would send his soul back down, and you would make a bracha over it, and when you would make a bracha, you would elevate in its tzitzis, and then he could go to heaven. So what did they do? They brought him down, and his neshama went into several wheat plants, and they grew and stuff like that. And the whole time there was a whole big fight that the grains that his neshama was in, the bad angels kept trying to make them fall off and get lost. And the same thing when they picked the wheat, they tried to make them fall off and get lost. And then when they beat it and chafed it and all that stuff, the good angels made sure that it would go through, and the bad angels were trying to make it lost, until finally it went to the vodka plant. And again, the bad angels try to make it like get lost. You know, the little bit of liquor gets lost. They tried to make the soul go into the liquor. The pieces, you know, those pieces that came from that wheat,
Right.
to get lost. And then finally, they got your father's soul into this vodka bottle. And then, even when they poured all the way down to when they were actually pouring the vodka, the bad angels were trying to make it go into another cup, and not your cup. And
Right.
the good angels were able to, you know, because in the vodka was more than just those little pieces.
Right.
The whole bottle of vodka. And inside that bottle of vodka was the little pieces, like the little whatever, it was molecules of vodka, you know,
Right.
that were his father's soul. And finally, after all that fighting and all that whole tumult and all the everything, they finally got the the whole of your father's soul into that little schnapps cup of vodka, and all you had to do was make a bracha over it and drink it, and your father would have gone to heaven.
Right.
And instead, look what you did. And the guy fainted. You know, so...
Right.
And afterwards, he asked the Rebbe to give him a ticket, you know, and he became a big chassid. Became a chassid of this Rebbe.
Right.
But from the story, you see that it's not just like anything. A piece of food that comes to you, that was designated for you. That's your piece of food.
Right.
Same thing like, you know what they say, that 40 days before they designate. So, for instance, there's a certain girl out there for every... I mean, even the people are not married. It's not that just that there's a bunch of girls and you'll get one. Not this one, so that one. You know, like they said, there's a lot of fish in the ocean.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. No, it's already beshert. That's what he called it, your beshert, you know.
Right.
Which girl goes to which guy?
Right.
And which guy goes to which girl? But it's not just a girl. It's not, I mean, well, of course, marriage, I mean, of course. No, but it's not like that. Even the chicken that you're going to eat this Shabbos, it had to be that chicken.
Right.
Like when that chicken was growing, that was already your chicken. It's not that, well, it just so happened there was 1 million chickens and I got this chicken. No. That was the chicken that was designated that this Shabbos would be this chicken, and you would make the bracha and eat the chicken as part of the Shabbos thing. And it had to be this chicken. And for the chicken also, it had to be dafka you.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So from this we learn that this is how it is on everything, really. So that and that's what he means here by this thing that seems to sort of be like against what he usually says in Chassidus, that he knows everything by knowing himself, and there's nothing outside of himself. And then he says, of course, there is nothing outside of himself, but he has to plan the world as if it's the actual thing that's outside of himself. ובחינת דיבור שמחשוב העצמי, זה כמו מה ששיר בעצם הכוח, מה שעתיד להיות בהשתלשלות. שזה נאמר, גליף ובטהרי לה. Hakikas Eisis ba'atzmus. That he was actually Mishayar exactly how it's going to be, what forces are going to have to come into it. וכן מה שנאמר, כי הוא אמר מחשוב העצמוס ויהי, הוא אמר ולא יעשה על ידי צמצום הראשון. And so that's the Indian of the Machshava. The Machshava is the original thought of it, and the Dibur is the thought of how it's going to come out. And the Maisa is the actual plan in the Machshava, how each little designated thing. So like, for instance, in the Machshava and Dibur, it's like, in a way, more general. Like on an emloch or stuff like that. But then there has to be the Maisish Machshava where he has to actually figure out every little detail of it.
Right.
So I got the Kol Amira B'chinas Dibur Shemachshava now. Shalamayla Mishmias Dibur Zulosa Kmo Hate Oznecha Ushma. Vayaksha Vayishma Kahagavna. That's also called Dibur Shemachshava. Umachshava Shemachshava Atzmis. I know Kmo Shamvor Lamayla B'machshavas HaSeichel Inyan B'tirufim Shainim Cholu V'hu Kasher Allah B'tzoyne Machshav to Ana Emloch Ukahagavna V'hu Al Pi Chachmosa B'tzoyne Atzmis. That's the actual Haskalah of the thing, that what he wanted. And that's the actual atzmius of the thing, that what he wants to rule. V'zeu she'amar v'haya eilav b'pinas malchus v'ensof ana emlachulu. ולפי זה מה שמתעורר בבחינת חפץ חסד הראשון על ידי מעשה התחתונים חולו, שמחמאסי אללה במחשבתו ורצונו חולו, הרי הוא מגיע לתחילה סיסאירוס הרוצה מחשבה עצמית חולו. So when you are ma'orer the chesed, that when through the maisim downstairs, you ma'orer the chesed upstairs, it's really since the thing of the chesed came up even before the chesed itself came up. It came up in the original machshava. So therefore really is ma'orer all the way to the original machshava, that therefore the chesed that he wanted to happen, happened. So therefore it goes into the Oris HaRotzen in the Machshava Atzmit. Zeu shenema niflosecha machshavasecha eleinu chulu atzmo misapir. It's just too much to talk about. Kmolit v'nosa and mispar. There's no number. In other words, the actual number, you say, so which number is it? Is it 52 or which one is it? 45, with which miluim. It says really there's no number at all. It goes way beyond. Really, it goes higher and higher, all the way to the machshava atzmis. It's totally beyond number. Because that's a number that has to include, like, the name of every nail in every... So it's atzmo misaper. You can't even really think about it. If you think about it, okay, so how does that work? So if you try to think about it, okay, this nail goes here and that nail goes there, and this, you can't, really, it's totally past any understanding or number.
Right.
And yet, it's not beyond his understanding.
Right.
Because, in other words, what he's saying here is he had to understand exactly how it works. It sounds like, wait a minute, it's like totally beyond anybody's understanding. We said, no, it's not. It can't be beyond anybody's understanding, because if the Eibusher wouldn't have understood it, it wouldn't have worked in the first place. He did understand it.
Right.
He made it come out and work like this. L'fi erech hamokas hachokma v'adas kach erech hamokas pinas hamachshava atzmis v'atzmus arin seif. And that's the thing, like we said, that the oimik of machshava is according to the oimik of the idea. And I'm going to have to stop here.
Just stop the tape?
Yeah. Other thing
I'm going to start from
what, beginning of what?
what you were just saying.
Why, we finished already. I'm just recapping what he said.
So start from the beginning of the recap.
No, so that's it. One is the machshava dibur ma'aseh, goes on all the levels, and the other one is that machshava of leah comes out of machshava of tvuna. The machshava of tvuna is the actual inner thing of the machshava sheb machshava, and machshava of leah that comes out of it, and it's mamish the same thing, really, almost. It's almost impossible to tell the difference between the two of them, but that's called like the dibur sheb machshava of machshava sheb machshava. In other words, in machshava sheb machshava, there's dibur sheb machshava sheb machshava. So that's when the leah is the lavush of the actual machshava sheb machshava, meaning the actual machshavet seichel. It's really also considered a dibur, because we're not talking in leah. We're not really talking about the actual seichel, but we're really talking about the fact that he's talking to himself inside of his head, even though he's not planning to talk it out yet. And basically also explained that that Malchus of Tvuna is the root of Malchus. And that's it.
What does it mean over here when it says derech ze yuvan be'inyan dalat rabati de'echad shu b'bchinat Malchus Tvuna shu b'bchinat achorayim de'ima? What does that mean exactly?
What do you mean? The Malchus of Tvuna, achorayim of Bina. Like it says in chapter 2. That's the whole thing in chapter 2.
All right.
It's only the midos of Bina. It's not the actual Bina itself. It's only the pashtos of Bina.
Right, okay.
It's not the real pneumius of Bina. The Bina, in general, Bina is Chabad of Bina.
Right.
And it's Chabad of Bina how it includes also the midos of Bina in a way of just that they're intellectual. And Tvuna is basically the midos of Bina, but not so much the midos of how the midos are inside of Bina, but how they're coming out of Bina. In other words, the whole thing of Tvuna is dafka the application, not the actual understanding itself, but
Right.
it's the acharayim of it. It's the back of it.
Right.
That's why it's on the back of the head, the dalet.
Uh-huh.
It's not the real front of the actual brain. It's the
Right.
back part of the brain. The tvuna is not the actual front of the bina, not the pneumius of the bina. It's the tail of the bina.
Right.
The tail end of the bina. It's the lower part. Like the back side of the bina, in other words.
Right.
And it's not the actual inyan of the bina itself, even though in a way it is. Not only that, in a way the tvuna reaches higher than the bina and all the things you say about it, but nonetheless, really the tvuna is not the real thing of the bina, and that's why, like the Americans, even though in some ways you see that they've reached a much higher height with tvuna than the Greeks reached with bina, but the Greek philosophers were high intellectual people.
Right.
Why? Because their midah was bina. And even though with the midah of tvuna, we see that there's a lot more advancements and stuff like that than with actual bina itself. That is true that tvuna gets you more, but nonetheless, it's not really it's just a tail. Like you see the Americans compared to Aristotle or something like that. And like you see, even their intellectual people, like you see a scientist. A scientist doesn't compare to a Socrates.
Right.
They don't even think about Socrates. Nonetheless, he thought about the nature of reality and stuff like that. And you see, finally, Aristotle finally converted. But you see, like an engineer, an American engineer, is a grubber mensch. A totally grub.